Let's see here. Okay, so week 1 we said, my season may change, but my God never does. The last week, when we don't have clarity, we use trust. And so here's kind of where this kind of gets real for us. We need to hit record. You already there? All right, perfect. At some point, trust requires movement. This is not one thing just saying, hey, I'm trusting, but we got to do something about that, right? And it's another thing to step forward when everything, feels uncertain. And if we're honestly, most of us are not stuck in making these types of decisions and things in our life because we don't know what to do. We're oftentimes stuck because we're just afraid to do it. And so that's where this week kind of meets us in Joshua 1:9. He says, have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. So here's this week's focal statement. Remember, each week I give you a focal statement and 5 statements about that. We will not let fear decide what faith has already made clear. We will not let fear decide what faith has already made clear. Father, please bless our time today in the short time that we have. We ask this in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. For those who are just watching, we had someone come in and give us some aspects on the races that are here in Georgia, politically speaking, and some knowledge along those lines, so we're limited in our time today. All right, first truth statement for today. Fear is natural, but it's not neutral. Fear is natural, but it's not neutral. Look at the verse again. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. Look, God would not tell Joshua not to fear if fear wasn't going to show up. Right? I mean, God knew that was going to happen. God knew that Joshua was going to go through times of fear. And for us, fear is a real part of life. Am I right? I mean, there's a lot of things in our life that we feel. We all feel it. Fear of making the wrong decision, right? Fear of what others may think about the decisions we make. Fear of the unknown, right? Fear of stepping into something new. So while I say, yes, fear is natural, it's not neutral. Because fear doesn't just exist, out there. It influences. Fear influences the things that we do, the decisions that we make, the responses that we have. It would be one thing if fear was just something out there and it really, it was vanilla. It was like, it's no big deal. Yeah, I'm afraid of this, but it does not affect our decisions. But that's not the case. Fear is not just a vanilla emotion. It actually influences the decisions that we do make, all right? Fear, it will delay obedience. It'll cloud judgment. All these things. It keeps us from stepping forward or stepping out. For example, there are times we know what the next step is, but we kind of hesitate. Not because we don't know, but because we're unsure of the outcome. Right? I know if I make this may happen. Now, it may or may not, but that's a fear that we have, right? If we're not careful, fear just doesn't whisper in our decisions. It's making decisions for us. And we never want to get to a place in our life where we're making decisions based on our fears. Remember? We're not going to let fear make decisions that faith has already made clear. So we have to ask ourselves questions. What is a fear that we might have right now that has the potential from keeping us from knowing what we know to do that's right? And I don't have time to go into that. Let me move on to my second thought. Fear is natural, but it's not neutral. Number 2, God's command is courage, not comfort. God's command is courage, not comfort. God didn't tell Joshua, hey, when you feel good and ready, when you kind of did all your due diligence, when you're comfortable, go ahead and do. No. He told him to be strong and courageous, right? Be strong and of good courage. So, look, courage, and so many times you've probably heard this definition, courage is not the absence of fear. It's moving forward in spite of it. That's what courage is, right? For us, that shows up in everyday life. Having a needed conversation with somebody. Courage. Making the decision for our family. Stepping into something that God is leading us towards, right? And if we're honest, we often want to say, well, let's wait just a little bit longer. Let's pray about this a little bit more, right? Let's make sure everything lines up. But obedience does not wait on comfort. When God tells us to do something, He doesn't say, look, when you feel comfortable, go ahead and make the decision. No, when God tells us to do something, He says, all right, I need you to do it right now. It doesn't wait on our comfort. Listen, it moves on conviction. And when we know God has told us to do something, then we need to be obedient and do it. And this is kind of where it gets personal for me. As you know, this season for me has involved me stepping away from the senior pastor role after many, many years, right? And moving to full-time evangelism within me. And I'll be honest with you, that decision did not come with full clarity. I didn't have everything laid out and everything lined up. There were questions. When was the timing on this? How are the provisions going to come in, right? What will it look like day to day? And everything in me would have loved to have all that figured out before I made that decision. It wasn't. It still isn't all laid out. I don't have that type of clarity, but that's how God led. He made the direction clear, but not every detail. Right? And at some point it came down to this. Was I going to wait until I felt completely comfortable with it? So I had all my finances worked out. I had all the details worked out. So I had all the meetings scheduled. And then say, all right, here's what I feel like God. No. I had to move forward in obedience. And that's what I did. And so that's where courage shows up, right? So ask yourself the question, where in my life am I waiting to feel ready instead of choosing to be obedient? Well, there are things probably in your life right now that you're like, I know I need to do that. I'm just not comfortable with it yet. I'm just not sure about it yet. But you know God's already given you the direction. Fear is natural. It's not neutral. God's command is courage, not comfort. Number 3, fear grows when we focus on the wrong things. Fear grows when we focus on the wrong things. He says in verse 9, neither be thou dismayed. Right? To be dismayed means overcome or overwhelmed, discouraged. And this happens when our focus shifts, right? We start focusing on things that could go wrong. We start focusing on things, on how big the challenge really is. We start focusing on the unknowns there, what we don't know, right? Instead of focusing on God. And so Joshua was about to lead Israel into a land filled with a lot of challenges, big challenges, right? A lot of uncertainty. If you focus on the battles ahead, if you focus on the walled cities, if you focus on the unknowns, if you focus on the responsibility that he had as a leader, he would have frozen. He never would have moved forward. And the same thing is true for us. For example, when we focus on the risk or the uncertainty of something or the what-ifs of a situation, fear grows. But when we focus on who God is and what He said and how He's been faithful all these years, faith grows. That's how we combat that. I'd struggle this sometimes daily. I wake up early and I'm praying, and all of a sudden I start thinking about, if I'm being honest, the finances, thinking about, the traveling, all this stuff. And if I dwell on that too long, my fear starts growing a little bit. But when I realize what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, Lord. I start praying for souls instead of cents, right? Dollars. When I start praying on decisions and the people and the ministry that I'm going to try to minister to, all of a sudden my focus changed, and I think about the 18 that were saved down in Columbus the other day, the blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, all right, Lord. Because my focus is redirected, right? Like I said, it would have been easy to focus on everything that was unknown and the transition, but the more we focus on the unknown, the bigger the fear becomes. The more we focus on God, the stronger the faith becomes. So, question to you, what are you focused on right now that may be fueling your fear instead of your faith? That's kind of where that fear starts influencing, right, our decisions. Number 4, but we are rolling through. I should do this every week, right? Just number 4. I'd like to go into more, but I want to get this to you. God's presence is the reason we can move forward. I know these are simple, no alliteration, just simple, but God's presence is the reason we can move forward. Now this is good. Listen to the last part of verse number 9. For the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest, right? Be strong, be courageous, be of good cheer, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest. And this is the foundation of the whole verse. Look at, God did not remove the challenges that were before Joshua. God did not take those things away from him, but he did promise his presence. He didn't say, all right, I'm going to take you out of the wall. See, all right, I'm going to, no. Joshua still had responsibility. Joshua still had uncertainties. Joshua still had battles ahead, but he also knew he had God with him. And that changes everything. And for us, the same is true. God does not promise every decision will be easy. God does not promise that every outcome will go the way that we expect it to do or want it to go. God does not promise that there will be no resistance, no kickback, no valleys, but he does promise his presence with us. And listen, if God is with us, we're not stepping into the unknowns by ourselves. I mean, that's really where it's at. And even in this transitional season of my life, the confidence has not come from having everything figured out. It's from knowing that God is with us. And that allows me to move forward. So a question for you could be this. How does your perspective change when you truly believe God is with you in the decision that you're facing? You know, I'd love to spend 10 minutes on how I knew when God led me to purchase this property and this facilities and relocate. It was absolute certain to me. I knew that. And we went through difficult times, and we went through all sorts of hurdles and obstacles and blah, 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 you know, to the point where, you know, had one man ask one of our deacons, does he not know the meaning of no? Because we kept running into no, no, no's. And if I had not had absolute certainty this is what God had for us, I may have begun to second guess because of all the hurdles, the obstacles. But that is literally the very thing. When I knew God gave me that direction, I knew that. And so every day that I hit another no, or hit another hurdle, or when the school board says they're not going to be able to do this, or the real estate guy says it's not going to happen, I was like, well, listen, I know what God told me. When it works out, I don't know. And it was that certainty that allowed me to keep going and not start second guessing, backing up, and questioning. I was focused on the right thing. Finally, then, number 5. Faith moves when fear says, stay. Faith moves when fear says, won't you just hold right there, right? Because here's the deal. Faith speaks and fear speaks. Well, I told you they weren't neutral, right? Fear says wait, delay, play it safe, get some more information, protect yourself. That's what fear tells us, and it's screaming in our ear. And faith says, obey. So you know what, God, step forward. Trust God. Step out. And we will always have to choose which voice we're going to follow, the voice of fear or the voice of faith in our life. And for many of us, the next step is not unclear. We know what needs to be addressed. We know what decisions need to be made. We know what direction God is leading. And so here's the tension. It's not clarity, it's courage. It's not like, well, okay, Lord, make it more clear. It's, God, give me the courage then to take that step. Our default is, I just need more information. Am I the only one that feels like, you're an engineer, right? You understand, you're a number guy. You want it to make sense in things in life. I do too. I've had to learn to say, faith doesn't always make sense. People say, well, that's stupidity. And people say, there's always a fine line between being stupid and being, you know, and faith. I don't think that's the case. Yeah, you don't tempt God. You're not presumptuous with that. But man, faith doesn't make sense. Faith is something things hoped for, evidence things not seen. We don't. Without faith, it's impossible to please Him. I mean, there's so much I could talk about right there. So the tension is not clarity in making these big decisions. The tension is courage. So this is where everything we've built kind of comes together. God doesn't change. Trust Him without full clarity. Now move forward in faith. And so our focal statement then becomes more than a statement. It becomes a decision. Look at your focal statement for today. We will not let fear decide what faith has already made clear. So ask yourselves, what steps are you delaying, not because you don't know what to do, but because fear is holding you back? See, fear will always be present. It will always be a part of our life, but it does not have to be in control. What kind of life is that if we just make every decision based on our life based on what we're afraid of, what we're scared of, what we're fearful of, what we don't know? God has not called us to live in hesitation. He doesn't want us to live there. He calls us to live by faith. And at some point, faith requires movement. Oh, I got faith, but if you're never making a decision, you're never stepping out, if you're never coming, making that decision, then you're just kind of rolling around. Faith requires movement. Not when everything makes sense. Not when everything is guaranteed, but when we know God is leading. All right? We will not let fear decide what faith has already made clear. All right, here's your homework. Discuss this with your spouse or a friend, a child. Where have we allowed fear, or what have you allowed fear to delay something that God has already made clear? Maybe there's a decision you've been praying about, and you really know what to do. It's just, you're so scared to make that. Maybe it's retiring. Maybe it's changing jobs at this stage of life. Maybe it's relocating. Maybe it's whatever. And you know it's what God has for you, but you're just afraid to make that. I encourage you. Ask God for courage to move forward. Ask God to give you strength to act in faith. Ask God to trust you to make the next step, and then commit to be doing that. Be obedient. All right? Any questions? We did that in just a short time right there. All right. I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here today. You can go ahead and turn us off there.